Marcus was already seated at a corner table, looking like a shadow of the confident man who'd kissed his mistress 4 days ago. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes hollow with desperation. He stood awkwardly as she approached. "Elena, thank you for coming. I didn't think you would." Elena's voice was calm, but firm. "Sit down, Marcus." She slid into the chair across from him with the grace of someone completely in control. A waiter appeared immediately. "Mrs. Thompson, your usual?" Elena replied, "Yes, Thomas, thank you." Marcus blinked in confusion. "You come here? You have a usual order?" Elena said simply, "I've been coming here twice a month for 3 years. You never asked what I did with my time." The waiter returned with a glass of expensive wine for Elena and water for Marcus, who hadn't been given the opportunity to order. Elena took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch between them like a canyon. Marcus finally broke. "Elena, please, I know I messed up. I was stupid. I was selfish. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, start over." Elena's laugh was soft and humorless. "Start over? Marcus, there's nothing to start. It's finished." Marcus protested weakly. "But everything I built." Elena corrected gently. "Everything I built." She pulled out her phone and opened a folder, sliding it across the table. "Let me tell you what really happened over the last 7 years, since you seem to have convinced yourself of a different story." Marcus stared at the screen, his face paling as he scrolled through spreadsheets, bank transfers, receipts, and legal documents. Elena recited the facts like a prosecutor delivering evidence. $60,000 in debt, I paid it. The house down payment, my money. Your business startup capital, my investment. Every single time you nearly failed, every time your decisions almost destroyed everything, I was the one who fixed it, quietly, without taking credit, because I loved you." Marcus whispered, "I didn't know." Elena interrupted, "You didn't want to know, because knowing would have meant admitting you weren't the successful, self-made man you told everyone you were. It would have meant saying thank you. It would have meant seeing me as an equal instead of an accessory." Marcus's hands trembled. "Vanessa's gone. She left the second she realized I had nothing. I see that now. I see what I lost." Elena leaned forward, her eyes holding his with an intensity he'd never seen before. "No, Marcus, you don't. You don't see what you lost because you never really saw what you had. You saw a quiet wife who cooked your meals and didn't complain. You never saw the businesswoman who owned a real estate portfolio worth millions. You never saw the daughter of Joseph King, who could have had any future she wanted, but chose to believe in you." Marcus's face went white. "Joseph King? The Joseph King?" Elena replied, "My father, the man whose calls you told me to ignore because he was too controlling, the man who wanted to invest in your business, but you were too proud to accept help from your wife's family." The weight of his ignorance crashed over Marcus like a wave. All those times Elena had suggested they visit her family, all those calls she'd taken in private, all those business trips she said were for her little consulting job. She'd been managing an empire while he played pretend in his small kingdom. Elena continued, "I found out about the others too, not just Vanessa. Claire, Jessica, probably more. I didn't bother investigating. 3 years of affairs, Marcus. 3 years of you disrespecting not just our marriage, but the woman who literally owned the ground you walked on." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "I'll do anything, anything to make this right." Elena reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table next to her phone. "Inside is a check for $5,000 and a one-way bus ticket to Atlanta. My lawyer tells me you have a cousin there who might give you a place to stay." Marcus looked confused. "You're giving me money after everything?" Elena replied, "I'm giving you a chance to start over, to become the man you always pretended to be instead of the man you actually were. Consider it my final investment in your potential." She stood, gathering her purse. That's more mercy than you showed me, Marcus, more than you showed any of the women you used and discarded. Marcus grabbed the envelope like a lifeline, then looked up at her with one last desperate hope. Is there any chance in the future that we could— Elena cut him off with one word. No. The word was final, absolute. The woman you married is gone, Marcus. She died the moment you kissed another woman in her kitchen. I'm someone else now, someone who knows her worth. She turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. If you ever try to contact me again, if you ever speak my name to the press, if you ever try to claim credit for anything we built together, I will bury you so deep legally that you'll wish you'd taken that bus ticket to another country. Are we clear? Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Elena walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the rhythm of someone who'd reclaimed her power. As she reached the door, her phone rang. She answered. Yes, Patricia. Her assistant's voice came through. Mrs. Thompson, your deal in Lagos just finalized. Congratulations, you're now the majority shareholder in the Meridian Hotel Group. Elena smiled as she stepped into the sunshine. Excellent. Prepare my travel arrangements. I want to see the properties in person. Behind her in the restaurant, Marcus sat alone with an envelope containing his future, a future so small it fit in his pocket. The lesson was complete. 3 months later, the city had moved on. Life continued its relentless forward march, indifferent to the small dramas of broken marriages and shattered egos. Marcus stood behind the counter of a hardware store in Atlanta, ringing up paint supplies for a contractor. The job paid minimum wage, barely enough for the tiny room he rented above a laundromat.
Every night, Marcus scrolled through social media, torturing himself with glimpses of a world he'd lost. That's how he saw it. The magazine cover that would haunt him forever. Business Africa magazine, the Silent Empress, how Elena King built a real estate empire while the world wasn't watching. The photograph showed Elena standing on the rooftop of a gleaming hotel in Lagos, the city sprawling behind her like a kingdom she'd conquered. She wore a crimson power suit, her natural hair in an elegant crown of coils, her smile radiant with the confidence of someone who'd finally stepped into her full power. Marcus had read the article 17 times, each reading more painful than the last. The article detailed her achievements. For years, Elena King operated in the shadows, quietly building a portfolio that now spans 12 countries across Africa. While managing what she calls her personal obligations, King was simultaneously acquiring properties, developing sustainable housing projects, and investing in women-led startups across the continent. The article mentioned her father, her education, her vision. It mentioned her recent divorce only in passing, recently freed from personal commitments that no longer served her growth. Marcus wasn't even important enough to be named. He'd tried in those first desperate weeks to tell his story to anyone who'd listen, but Richard Davidson's legal team had been thorough. A cease and desist letter arrived within hours of his first social media post, attempting to claim credit for their success. The message was clear: speak her name again and face complete destruction. So Marcus lived in obscurity, watching from a distance as Elena soared. Some nights he felt angry, convinced she'd tricked him, trapped him, stolen what was rightfully his. Other nights, usually after too many drinks, he'd let himself remember the truth. The meals she'd cooked, the debts she'd paid, the quiet way she'd sacrificed her own light so he could pretend to shine. He'd thrown away a queen to chase fool's gold. Meanwhile, across the country and across the ocean, Elena stood in the lobby of the Meridian Hotel in Lagos, watching with satisfaction as guests checked in. This property alone was worth more than everything Marcus had thought he'd owned. Her phone buzzed, a message from Patricia. The Women's Entrepreneurship Center is ready for your inspection. Grand opening next month. Elena smiled. The center was her passion project, a place where women could learn business skills, access capital, and build their own empires. She'd named it Phoenix Rising because she believed every woman deserved the chance to rise from the ashes of whatever had tried to keep her small. A young woman approached tentatively, holding a worn copy of Business Africa magazine. "Miss King, I'm sorry to bother you, but could you sign this? Your story, it gave me courage to leave a situation that wasn't good for me." Elena took the magazine, noting the page was bookmarked at a quote she'd given. "The bravest thing I ever did was choose myself." As she signed the magazine, Elena thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago, standing in that kitchen, watching her husband betray her, feeling the weight of 7 years of making herself small. She thought about the smile she'd given him, the smile that terrified him because he couldn't understand it. That smile had been her first act of freedom. The young woman said, clutching the signed magazine like a treasure, "Thank you, you're an inspiration." After she left, Elena walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Lagos skyline. Somewhere in Atlanta, Marcus was probably working a job he hated, living a life diminished by his own choices. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet sense of justice, like the universe finally balancing its scales. Her father's words from years ago echoed in her mind. Protect yourself, build an exit plan. She'd done more than that. She'd built an empire. That evening, Elena visited the site of what would become her women's center. The building was still under construction, but she could see its potential. As she walked through the space, her phone rang, an unknown number. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. She answered, "Hello?" A trembling voice responded, "Miss King, my name is Grace. I just left my husband. I have nothing, but I read your story and I wondered, is there any way you could help me understand how you did it, how you found the strength?" Elena sat down on a construction beam, suddenly transported back to that moment in her kitchen, to the decision that had changed everything. She said gently, "Tell me your story, Grace." As the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Elena listened, and when Grace finished, Elena began to speak, not as a businesswoman or an empress, but as a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged transformed. Elena said, "The first thing you need to know is that your story isn't over, it's just beginning. Let me tell you what I learned about resilience, about patience, and about the quiet power of a woman who knows her worth." The conversation lasted an hour. When it ended, Elena sat in the growing darkness, feeling the weight and wonder of her journey. She'd lost a marriage, but she'd found herself. She'd been betrayed, but she'd been freed. And now she would help other women find their own freedom. Elena stood and walked out of the building, her silhouette framed against the city lights. Tomorrow, she had meetings in 3 countries. Next week, she'd break ground on 2 new properties. Next month, she'd open the center that would change countless lives. The Silent Empress was silent no more, and her empire was just beginning. What did you think of Elena's journey? Was her revenge justified? This is more than a story about revenge. It's about a woman who loved unconditionally, sacrificed endlessly, and was betrayed completely. But instead of breaking, she rose. Instead of begging, she built. Instead of crying, she claimed what was always hers. Marcus learned the hardest lesson of his life. You can't steal someone's light. You can only borrow it for a while. And when they take it back, you're left in the darkness you always inhabited, finally seeing yourself for who you really are.
Elena learned something too, that the love you give yourself is the only love that can never be taken away, that the empire you build with your own hands can never be stolen, that the woman who knows her worth doesn't need anyone's permission to claim it. To every woman watching this who's making herself small for someone who can't see her value, to every person who's sacrificing everything for someone who takes it all for granted, your story doesn't end in that kitchen, in that moment of betrayal, in that instant when you realize you've been loving the wrong person. Your story begins there. The moment you choose yourself is the moment you become unstoppable. Never underestimate a woman who's been quiet for too long. She's not weak. She's not broken. She's strategic. And when she finally moves, she doesn't just win, she conquers. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to save yourself? Your story matters. Share it. Inspire someone else. And remember, your worth isn't determined by who loves you. It's determined by how you love yourself. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear Elena's message. Thank you for watching, and remember, your story isn't over. It's just beginning. It's time. Come get me. That's all Elena said into the phone, her voice steady as stone, while watching her husband kiss another woman in their living room. Marcus thought she would cry, beg, break down like women do in the movies, but she just smiled. What he didn't know was that single phone call would destroy everything he thought he owned. Everything he believed was his kingdom was about to crumble, and he'd built it all on land that never belonged to him. Before we dive into this story of the ultimate comeback, let me set the scene. The aroma of jollof rice filled the kitchen as Elena stirred the pot with practiced ease. 7 years of marriage had taught her exactly how Marcus liked his meals: spicy, perfectly seasoned, served with a cold drink and a warm smile. She hummed softly to herself, unaware that her world was about to shatter in the most unexpected way. The front door opened with more force than necessary. Elena glanced at the clock on the wall. 6:30. Marcus was home earlier than usual. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward the living room, ready to greet her husband with the same devoted energy she'd given him every single day of their marriage. But the words died in her throat. Marcus stood in the center of their living room, his arm wrapped possessively around a woman Elena had never seen before. The stranger was younger, dressed in a tight red dress that left little to the imagination, her makeup flawless, her confidence radiating like heat from a flame. She looked at Elena with barely concealed triumph, as if she'd already won a war Elena didn't know she was fighting. Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Marcus, what's going on?" Marcus didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Instead, he smiled, that cruel, cold smile she'd seen glimpses of over the years, but had always excused as stress or exhaustion. Tonight, there was no hiding it. Tonight, he wanted her to see exactly who he'd become. Marcus said casually, as if introducing a colleague at a business meeting, "Elena, meet Vanessa. Vanessa, this is Elena, my soon-to-be ex-wife." The words hung in the air like smoke. Elena felt her heart skip a beat, but she refused to let her face betray the earthquake happening inside her chest. She'd given this man everything: her youth, her money, her unwavering support when he had nothing. She'd worked 3 jobs to pay off his debts, put the house in her name to protect them from his creditors, and stood by him when his own family had given up. And this was her reward. Vanessa giggled, a high-pitched sound that grated against Elena's nerves. "Oh, Marcus, you didn't tell me she was so plain. No wonder you needed a real woman." Elena expected Marcus to defend her, to show even a shred of the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Instead, he pulled Vanessa closer and did something that would be burned into Elena's memory forever. He kissed her, not a quick peck, not an accidental brush of lips, a deep, passionate, deliberate kiss right there in the living room Elena had furnished with her own hard-earned money. He kissed his mistress in front of his wife, his eyes open just enough to watch Elena's reaction, to feed off her pain like a vulture circling fresh prey. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, the breakdown, the tears, the begging, the dramatic scene that would justify his cruelty and let him paint himself as the victim of a hysterical woman. Elena seemed in his eyes. He wanted her to fall apart. So she did the one thing he never expected. She smiled. Not a sad smile, not a broken smile, a genuine, peaceful smile that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her soul. It was the smile of a woman who just made a decision, who just seen the path ahead with clear clarity, who just realized she was finally, beautifully free. Marcus and Vanessa broke apart, confusion replacing their triumph. This wasn't the script. Elena's supposed to cry, to scream, to make a scene. The smile unsettled them in a way tears never could. Elena reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. Her fingers were steady as she scrolled through her contacts and pressed a name she'd saved months ago. A name she'd hoped she'd never have to use, but had prepared just in case. The call connected after 2 rings. Elena said softly, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face, "It's time. Come get me." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. The smile never left her face. Marcus's voice lost some of his confidence. "What? What did you just do?" Elena replied simply, "I called a taxi." She walked back into the kitchen, turned off the stove, and removed her apron. The jollof rice she'd been cooking could burn for all she cared. She was done serving a man who couldn't see her value. Within minutes, a taxi pulled up outside. Elena grabbed her purse, the only thing in this house she actually needed, and walked toward the door. She paused at the threshold and looked back at Marcus one last time. "Enjoy your victory," she said quietly. Then she stepped out into the night, leaving behind 7 years of sacrifice, devotion, and love wasted on a man who never deserved it.
For more videos, please subscribe, like, and comment.